in total conflict with what was this morning. It's just because I haven't been able to attend the sessions yet. I look forward to seeing them on video. But yeah, going to talk about Fight the Rot and improving support for linking to electronic resources. And I guess this is another apology for the title of this presentation. It is not very elegant. But I believe that when I submitted this presentation proposal, that very morning, I was dealing with the very topic that we'll be talking about over the course of this hour. As well, get started. Let's make sure I have everything in order here. Okay, so basically what we're talking about here is a common experience for all of us. If your web presence is like ours, we have broken links. We have broken links in all kinds of places you wouldn't expect. And that's true not only for our library web presence, our library website or LibGuides. It's true of other domains where we aren't necessarily creating the links, but even if a faculty member or a student is creating a link, we have some responsibility to support it. So throughout this conversation, I'll really be talking about links that might appear anywhere on our website, and the learning management system, and syllabuses, reading lists, and link lists that students or faculty create as they're conducting their research. Links get created for all different kinds of reasons and all different kinds of contexts. And, ideally, we're supporting patrons and our colleagues in the library as much as possible to make sure that when they create a link, when they save or share a link, that they're creating something that's going to work in the short term, ideally in the long term. So as we all know, some links break naturally. We expect that. But some are bad to begin with. And of course, in the collection services department at Georgia Southern, we worry about both. But I really worry especially about the latter, the links that are bad to begin with, because ideally, again, we're supporting folks in a way that minimizes the likelihood that they're creating links that aren't going to work for them or for their colleagues down the road. And as part of this conversation, it has to be acknowledged that library personnel are only really a little less likely to create bad links than our patrons. I don't consider this our colleagues' fault at all, because frankly, figuring out what is the best link to provide access either to a database or to an electronic resource or a permalink to a record in the catalog is not always clear. It's not always easy. Platforms differ, and they can differ dramatically. Platforms and databases can present linking tools that give a false impression of the ease or effectiveness with which you can generate a link just by clicking on that feature. Our colleagues need our support in technical services just as much as our patrons when we're talking about link creation and link management. So just to provide some context, we can look at a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. And I'll start with one that we see all the time, and that you may as well in your libraries, the dreaded session ID. And we see this a lot in EBSCO host links. Of course, as you're probably familiar with, the link very often that you have in the address bar when searching an EBSCO database includes session ID information, which deteriorates very quickly. It's not long at all before a link that, say, a patron has scraped out of the address bar and held on to goes bad, is no longer useful. The link that I have on the screen right now, there is actually an inkling of hope with this link because you can see that it includes a catalog query string variable in there, as well as an accession number. So there is just a little bit of hope that we might be able to figure out what this thing was. But every now and again, you might hear from a patron or a faculty member who has done a wonderful job of curating a list of links from Discover or from another EBSCO database that their links aren't working anymore. They get in touch with the library, and you quickly discover all they have is links with session ID in it, no additional citation information. And more often than not, you just have to tell them you're out of luck. There's no way to recuperate the information about these sources. Another example that maybe isn't quite so obvious, I've included here a DOI, or at least a DOI in URL form. Because on the one hand, what link could be more useful than a DOI that leads directly to a resource? But it does present a potential challenge for off-campus users, where if authentication isn't built into that URL, they aren't necessarily going to be able to open and make use of that URL from off campus. Another challenge that we run into occasionally with DOIs is that you may find a DOI in a database, but of course that DOI doesn't point back to the record in the database you're looking in, but would actually point to the vendor website. And so someone might click on that DOI and get to a vendor website, but you don't actually have access to the full text at that vendor site. That can pose a problem. And I apologize if you're hearing my phone ring. So our solution to this challenge has been to develop a website or a LibGuide on the LibGuides platform that directly deals with this challenge of, how are we going to support patrons and other library personnel with linking to different kinds of library resources. So we've been working on this project for about 2 years now, slowly but surely fleshing this LibGuide out. And it's finally complete. It's finally at a point where I feel like I can talk about it with folks. But the basic point is to provide for basically every database that we support here at Georgia Southern. We have an article on this LibGuide that explains how to create appropriate links for personal use, for sharing, links that will work both on and off campus. And so, this presentation, frankly, is a show and tell. My intent is just sort of take you guys through this LibGuide, show you what it does, maybe what it does well, what it doesn't do quite so well. Hopefully this is useful to you if you experience challenges with broken links at your own institution. And I also just really look forward to hearing what other institutions are doing about this challenge. So this is our solution. If you have a solution, especially if you have a better solution, I'd love to hear about it during Q&A. So basically, the guide is made up of a series of articles. We have one article on creating database-friendly URLs. So that folks, when they go to the AZ database list, are able to create an appropriate sharing URL from the database list. We have an article on creating permalinks in GillFind. And then we have about 175 articles on creating database item and result list URLs, again, for all of the different databases that we support. And as we go through this, I will definitely be taking us to the guide so you can get a look at it and get a look at some of the articles. But I'll just walk us through some of these articles so you get a feel for what's there and what they do. So the first article that we developed was to create database-friendly URLs. We use LibGuide's A to C database list as our primary A to C database list at Georgia Southern. And so really all this article does is point out how to use the share icon on the database list page and grab the library's friendly URL. We do assign friendly URLs to all of our databases because, of course, that has the advantage of allowing us to update base URLs on the back end, and we're certain that that will update if somebody has saved a link or created a bookmark or a desktop shortcut to a database. Basically, the backstory on this is that we do occasionally see library faculty and staff using the address bar URL after clicking on the database friendly URL, which of course we know doesn't always give you a valid URL to share with others. So we really try to encourage library personnel to orient toward using friendly URLs. And so, when this crops up with a colleague, I'll just point them in the direction of this article and say, hey, here's your best practice for when you're going to share a link on your own LibGuide, or, if you're going to share one with a faculty member to put into LMS or into a syllabus. The other kind of generic article that we have in here is for creating permalinks to GILFIND records. On the guide, we really frame this in terms of grabbing permalinks for journal holdings, because, of course, one challenge we often see with faculty in their syllabuses or in the learning management system is that they want to provide a link to the library's holdings for an article. But what they do is they end up providing a link to the holdings for a journal in a particular database rather than providing the permalink to our holdings in GILFIND. And of course, the disadvantage there is that as our holdings change, as content, full text content moves between databases, we may add access in one database, we may lose access in another. The faculty don't have the benefit of linking to the holdings record that will show them our full holdings across databases. So again, we really try to encourage faculty and library personnel to make use of the holdings permalink out of GILFIND. And this article, serves that purpose. Of course, this article is relevant to any resource in GILFIND and grabbing the appropriate permalink for that. And then kind of the center point of this guide, of course, is the articles that we provide for all of our supported databases. So again, for every database that appears on our A to Z database list, we include an article on how to create a link and an item record or a link to an item record or result list. And we'll take a look at one in just a minute. In each case, we explain how to create the link that will authenticate on and off campus. So again, it's very easy to go into a database and grab a URL that you think is going to work for everybody. But in point of fact, it may only accommodate your on-campus users. And we want to make sure that as much as possible, folks are getting in the habit of creating URLs that are going to authenticate either through Open Athens or in a handful of cases through Easy Proxy. But let me just go ahead and jump into one of these articles really quickly so you can see what it does. I'll bring up our article for EBSCO. And you can see immediately in red letter here, do not copy the URL that appears in the address bar of your browser to create or share a link to the resource. Because honestly, EBSCO session IDs are kind of our biggest challenge, both internally and externally with libraries, personnel, and patrons. And so it's just a very, brief description of, from the detailed record for the specific resource, click permalink at the bottom of the tools menu, highlight and copy the permalink that appears in the permalink window above the resource information. We get a screenshot with a description of those same steps. And then at the bottom, share this link with Georgia Southern students, faculty, and staff. This link should work on and off campus. And we provide a link to get additional help if they need it. Wherever possible, we provide an article both for creating a link to an individual resource and then also to a result list. And we'll get a look at this a little bit farther on. Of course, certain databases support creating a link to an item, an individual item, but they may not support creating a link to a result list. These boxes appear in all of these tabs on the LibGuide. In a case where a particular kind of link is not supported, we just say that, this database doesn't support creating a shareable link to a result list. So, even if it's not possible to create a reliable link, folks know that by looking at the article and can trust that information. So, of course, we have over 350 databases on the A to Z database list at Georgia Southern. Each one has its own unique approach to providing links or creating links. So it does require that we provide a lot of different articles depending on the requirements of the given database. So, in some cases, the vendor's built-in linking tool is adequate. An example of that would be Films on Demand, where the Films on Demand share features do support reformatting the Films on Demand base URL for Open Athens and provide a redirect URL. Of course, other databases either don't support that kind of rewriting, or it's just as likely that we haven't gotten around setting it up yet, and it's our fault. In a couple of rare occasions, like I say, we're still need to use easy proxy for folks to create those links. But I'll just jump into the Films of Demand article really quickly, and you can see that again at the top of the article, we just provide a brief set of steps. We provide in a note any warnings. Don't do this. This will definitely break. Just intervening and remediating with common practices that aren't going to work well for folks. And again, we provide a screenshot that takes folks through the steps as they would see them in the record. In the case of Films on Demand, in addition to providing information about creating links to an item as well as a result list, of course, we have a lot of faculty who use Films on Demand in the learning management system. And Films on Demand at Georgia Southern is partially supported in Desire to Learn. So we have fleshed out over time a series of additional links explaining different techniques or ways of embedding Films on Demand into Desire to Learn, or what we call Folio here at Georgia Southern. So, not every database gets this level of coverage. It just depends on the frequency with which we hear from faculty requesting support for getting content of a particular database into the learning management system or into their syllabuses. Another one to point out really quickly for us is Emerald Insight. In this case, Emerald Insight either doesn't have, or we haven't configured a tool to that would provide the Open Athens redirect URL for Emerald Insight. So in this case, we provide instructions for how to grab an appropriate base URL from the browser and then open up the Open Athens link generator, find the institution, paste the URL in, and then copy the shareable link. As you can imagine, we have a lot of articles that look like this because we have a lot of databases where the built-in tool isn't configured or able to support generating the Open Athens URLs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. One advantage of that, of the fact that a lot of databases sort of follow the same pattern for creating an appropriate URL, is that we really don't need a unique article for every single database. Like I say, we have about 175 articles right now to cover 350 databases. As you can imagine, a lot of those articles are for EBSCOhost and ProQuest platform, Web of Science. We're able to use the same article for a number of Fine Online databases, so on and so forth. So there are efficiencies to be found, when developing a guide like this. You just look for groups of databases that you can appropriately cover with a single article. Actually, the fact that we have 175 articles right now is more than we really need. When we started developing this guide, we actually created unique articles for a lot of databases that follow the exact same pattern. Basically, you grab the address bar URL and you put it through the Open Athens link generator. Voila, you have your link. In hindsight, we could have just produced a single generic article for that kind of database, and we would have ended up with far fewer than 175 articles. So, that's actually something I'll mention, when talking about next steps for this project. We probably do want to go through and see if we can reduce the number of articles that we're supporting, given those similarities. Within that, there are oddities. There are a lot of odd situations where you're going to write a unique article for the resource because a resource just behaves differently than any other resource, or it has a sufficiently unique user interface that you need to make sense of what the patron is going to see by providing them with screenshots that'll make sense of it. So I've just brought in here 3 examples of some of these unique situations. One is ProQuest platform. If you're familiar with the platform, you know that to create a link to a result list actually takes some work. You have to create a personal account in ProQuest, and you can generate a link for a result list, but then by default, that link is going to stop working in a year's time. There are a couple of databases that we work with where you have to create a personal account to get a link. So we've addressed this in the ProQuest article. Of course, for creating a link for an item in ProQuest is pretty straightforward. They provide easy access to the URL in that case. But in the case of creating a link to a result list, we need to provide additional steps, including directing the patron to create a personal account and logging into it. And we include in this, information about the potential expiration of the URL down the road. Another example for us is Grant Forward, which is a database for looking up grant information. In their case, you have to create a personal account to create a link to a set of results, but that link will work for a maximum of 2 weeks. So one of the decisions we had to make is, are we going to write an article and communicate to patrons that you can create a shareable URL for a result list in Grant Forward, knowing that that link is inevitably going to rot after 2 weeks? We decided, no. What we ended up doing is we say in the Grant Forward article, that links to result lists are not supported. It's a half truth, admittedly, but we just felt like it was maybe not appropriate to share advice about creating a link that's going to have such a short lifespan. We might rethink that at some point. I don't know, but in our experience, not a lot of folks are looking at creating result lists for a grant forward. I think it also depends on how your patrons interact with a given resource, whether it's worth doing. Another kind of oddity, and I'll use Ovid as an example here, is that some databases just flat out do not provide any direct support for creating a shareable link. The address bar URL is not usable for this purpose. There's no tool in the user interface for creating a shareable link. So in those cases, we did hunt around a little bit on the platforms and ask the question, is there a way we can get something that would work for patrons to share? And in the case of Ovid, what we found is that you can go into the citation for a given article and find a URL in certain citations that you can then run through the Open Athens link generator and come up with a valid shareable URL. In this case, Ovid does not support linking directly to a result list. So this is an example of that kind of message. This is just a good example of where, it can take a little bit of poking around to figure out what options do we have to offer, and are they worth offering based on what we know about folks' use of the database. And in the case of Ovid, we felt like as awkward as these instructions are, they're worth providing because we have any number of nursing faculty who are going to be interested in providing URLs in syllabuses or reading lists. And so, the fact that we were able to identify a solution was good. It's a lot of work, but for somebody who has an interest in making sure they're providing links that'll work down the road, there you go. We've got something for them to use. Another oddity, a situation that we've run into on occasion, is where you have multiple databases or resources that are available in the same platform, but the means by which you create a shareable URL differs depending on which resource you're working with in that platform. And this came up for us most recently working with ArtStore. If your institution subscribes to ArtStore or uses it, you may be aware that Ithaka, the publisher of JSTOR and ArtStore, is in the process of migrating all ArtStore content onto the JSTOR platform. And so you'll be able to search JSTOR content on one tab, and then the ArtStore material on another tab, or at least that's how they have it set up right now. The oddity here is that depending on whether you're searching the JSTOR content or the ArtStore content, you have slightly different instructions for how to generate a shareable link. For example, I'll just bring up the JSTOR instructions here, and I'll just scroll down and make the point quickly that with JSTOR, you do have the ability to create links for both individual items and result lists. Right now, that's not the case for ArtStore. So if I jump over to the ArtStore article really quickly, you'll see that we've had to indicate that ArtStore JSTOR does not support linking directly to a result list. This in a way is a warning that it's not always fair to assume that just because you have a single platform, or at least what appears to be a single platform, that you can count on the same procedures for creating shareable links in all cases. This was, we kind of stumbled upon this issue as we were looking at ArtStore over the course of the last few months as Ithaka has been working on this migration. So again, those oddities definitely crop up, and so you'll never be able to get down to just a handful of articles to support this kind of guide. It also means that over time, this guide and these articles really need to be audited. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So, a LibGuide is great, but it's not useful to anyone unless people know how to find it and make use of it. So part of how we address that is with the detailed descriptions that we provide with our databases on the A to Z database list. So these articles are accessible via the detailed description for each database. Again, we use SpringShare A to Z database list for our primary database list. And then we use libanswers for our detailed descriptions. We actually include our detailed descriptions on our library's FAQ. And within each detailed description, we have at the base of each article, a standard set of links. And I'll just jump into our Academic Search Complete article really quickly. And you can see down here at the bottom, we're providing the friendly URL for the database asset. And then right here, instructions for creating permalinks for folios, syllabuses, etc. So we try to highlight these articles in the context of the detailed description. Of course, it's not perfect. I mean, how many people at the end of the day look at your detailed descriptions? But in a way, they're here to support our reference and instruction library. And so they have a very easy way of getting to these links. If they're working with somebody in reference, or if they're working with a faculty member on preparing links for a syllabus, they can make reference to this and say, hey, you can always find these articles there. And get to the support article you need to create those valid links. So of course, this guide can be found on our primary LibGuides menu, but by and large, I anticipate most of these articles will get used through the detailed descriptions on our FAQ. Another big challenge that we had to think through when creating this guide is, again, we have roughly 175 articles. That means a LibGuide with 175 tabs, which is a mess if you stick with the out-of-the-box navigation menus in LibGuide. So we originally designed it that way and very quickly realized this isn't going to work very well for patrons, especially if they're on a mobile device where the tabs all accumulate at the top of the page before the content areas. Nobody wants to scroll through a list of 175 entries. So in the course of developing this project, we worked very closely with Justin Barnett, who is our new web development guru in the Georgia Southern Libraries. And he was able to come up with, I think, a very eloquent solution to navigating this guide. And if what you see here looks interesting, not just for a linking the library resources guide, but for any guide where you have just a lot of tabs, more tabs than is appropriate for the default navigation. Justin has written this up and shared this on the SpringShare Lounge. So I encourage you to take a look at that post he just put up, I believe, yesterday on SpringShare Lounge, where he describes how we're doing this. But I'll just jump back onto the homepage of the guide, and what you can see is we've eliminated any default tab navigation at the top or side tab navigation, and instead we're using a simple unordered list below on the page that has a button basically for all of our databases. So if you want to scroll through that list and find what you're looking for, go for it. But we've also included a search tool here where basically we can just type in the name of the resource or start typing in a keyword for the resource, and we'll get back a list for that keyword. So we can pretty much put anything, help spell things correctly, put anything in there and find the appropriate entries. And one of the advantages here, obviously, for mobile users is that by including that menu down at the bottom, if you're on a narrower viewport width, this just reformats appropriately. In addition to using this menu on the guide homepage, we're also making use of an adapted navigation menu on individual pages. So at the top, we just have the home link, the links to the database-friendly URLs and journals and holdings articles. And if somebody wants to search for a different article from this page, they can make use of the same search feature on an individual article page. So it is accessible from here. Of course, what does this mean on the admin view? Justin thought about that as well and came up with a solution where if we look at this guide in admin view, you'll see that the default navigation is preserved. So it's very easy to navigate and move between the individual tabs. The styling and the behavior is just applied on the live side of the site. And the way we manage this navigation menu, I'll go back to the home page here, is, of course, down here we have the database list in a mapped box. And if we go into edit view, Justin has set up the CSS so that we can simply edit this as an unordered list, add or subtract entries, add or subtract links. And when we save that, it's added to the dynamic menu that we got on the home page and on the inside pages. So again, I think this has been a really eloquent solution to a navigation issue that we really confront with any LibGuide that has a lot of tabs. So I anticipate we'll probably be using this technique for other similar guides where the default navigation is just too unwieldy to be particularly useful. So maintaining all of this, as you can imagine, creating this guide on the front end was somewhat time consuming. That was a lot of articles to develop up front. And at the end of the day, I think we could have been a little smarter about it as we identified guides that fell into categories where one article would do. But it does take a fair amount of time commitment in the early going. Of course, since we've done the work, if you see anything here that looks interesting to you, and if nothing else, if you want the EBSCO or ProQuest articles, they should be pretty easy to adapt to another environment. But we're hopeful that updating this on an ongoing basis will not be too onerous. Day to day, most updates can be handled transactionally as databases are added or subtracted or go through any kind of significant user interface update. We can just deal with those as they arise. We have obviously written the creation, deletion, and updating of these articles into our existing maintenance workflows for the database assets. So, if we add a database or remove it from the A to Z database list, it's just right there in the workflow that we need to develop this and make sure it's linked in the appropriate places. What I anticipate we'll do in terms of ongoing auditing is establish an annual or maybe a biennial schedule where we have somebody go through each article and make sure that it's still valid, make sure it works. And so we can catch any unreported user interface changes or any user interface changes that we simply missed occurring over time. At our current number of articles, for us, that would be reviewing about 7 articles per month, which which seems, doable in the grand scheme of things. So again, we're hopeful that, maintaining this guide over time won't be too onerous. So next steps for this project, the development of this guide has really wrapped up in the last month or so. We've not promoted it too aggressively at this point. So what I anticipate doing in the next several months, in the next year, is to focus on promoting it with other library personnel, with our faculty and staff here in the library, and providing them with training on it, so that everybody in the library is fully aware of it. I'm especially interested in our liaison librarians being aware of it, with the hope that they would share it with faculty, teaching faculty, as they're working on syllabuses in the library management system, on reading lists. Because again, the goal here really is to minimize links that do not work for folks at their origin, and ensuring that the links that faculty, share with their students are going to work as well off campus as on campus. With that work done, there's definitely work to do promoting this to the teaching faculty. In a lot of instances, that's something that I think the liaisons would want to be in control of. Of course, within our technical services department, that's something that we would continue to support, but we'd really be looking for guidance from the liaison librarians on how to promote this to teaching faculty. Other next steps that are really more internal, and that I've described is, further consolidating articles, making the project more efficient over time, by reducing the number of articles we have to support. Another thing that came up as we were working on this project is, by and large, we decided not to advise in the articles. We decided not to advise redirecting DOIs. In part for the reasons that I described earlier. But again, in many cases, you'll find a DOI in one of our databases that's actually pointing to a different website that may or may not be appropriate. Also, in a lot of database user interfaces, DOIs are presented, but they're not presented as URLs. And so explaining to folks how to convert those to a shareable link would involve additional steps, to first get the DOI into URL form, and then prepare it as a redirectable or a proxy prefixed link. So we felt like, that at least getting started with this project, that there were a couple of drawbacks to using DOIs that we needed to think through more. Again, I think our decision on this will be driven in part by user interfaces. If there are database user interfaces that are better adapted to our writing instructions, we might focus on those. Or if we're dealing with databases that we know receive a certain kind of use that would argue on its behalf, we may do it there. Those are just decisions we'll have to think about, over time as we kind of live into using this guide and promote it and see how people use it. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Again, it's kind of a show and tell, just sharing what we've done with this guide over the course of the last year. Hopefully you see some things here that might be useful to you. Anything we've done, obviously, we're happy to share. But again, if at your institution you've taken another approach to this task, or a parallel approach, I'd love to hear about that. Always happy to or excited to hear about how folks are tackling kind of perennial problems like this. So thanks, and I'm happy to answer questions.
If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We did have somebody ask Jeff for the link, but Rod
Right.
got that for folks.
Thanks.
For the Spring Share, which looks really cool. All right. Well, I think I'm not seeing anything come in other than many thanks and many congrats for doing this. We will have this recording up soonish once I get them to Joy at the end of the day, and then folks can access it there. All right. Well, Jeff,
Yeah, thank you
I
all very much.
appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll get a few minutes back this afternoon. If anybody's going to attend the next session, that's at 3 o'clock. So we'll hopefully see you then.
All right. Thank you
All right.
all.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.